Testing, 1, 2, 3. There's something. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay for in the hall and then for the online, okay, right? Yeah. Okay, good. So we're back to chapter 9 of the Avatamsaka Sutra. And I wanted to just pick up on two things that came up last week before we move on. So what I'm looking at are the verses from last week. Let's see what I got here. So if we look at somewhere around page 48, we read these last week, so we don't have to reread them. We'll just pick up, but it's the Ryo Genrulai, that verse, and then the next verse is Iche Shi Jian Zhong. In the English, basically, it says, if one sees thus come one with body and mind, apart from discriminations, and we said, we translate that a little differently. Free from discriminations. And then the text says, then with regard to all dharmas, one forever transcends all doubt and obstructions. And the next one, finishing up on that page, within all worlds and at all places, he turns the dharma wheel, yet is without a nature and without a turning. Thus the guiding master speaks expediently. And I think we read the Chinese for this last week, correct? Okay. So what I'm going to try to do is touch on 2 points from this and hopefully get some thought and discussion going. And then next week I want to pick up on the remaining verses and one theme of the remaining verses, which is, I noticed, a recurring expression called fanbie. And you'll see this here. Actually, it appears in the verse we're looking at right now. So when you see if one sees Ruyo, Jian Rulai, right, and then you have body and mind, Shanqin, Li, which is to leave or separate from, and there's the expression, fanbie. And then if you notice, we go down to the rest of the verses, you'll see it again in the verse that I haven't read, coming up, where it says, Yu Fa Wu Huo. And then at the third line, you've got Bushang Fanbie Xin. So you see that expression again. And then on the verse, the closing verse, second to the last closing verse, you see it again. Living beings and lands are entirely still and quiescent, and yet without wu fanbie. Okay, see it there again. So, I mean, there's different ways one could come at this text, and some combination of moving along, but also some depth. But depth, of course, depends a great deal on what I can possibly tease out, which may not be very deep, and then what you yourselves see. And what you yourselves see and pick up in this text may be entirely apart from our reading of it and my discussion of it. This is the wondrousness of the interchange between our own practice and our own cultivation and the text. I'm really just a holding place. I'm just here on a Friday night to get this text into the air. But the real transference from the text to you, the listener, I'm a very poor conduit for that. Your own cultivation is the best exegesis. It's the best interpretive tool for recovery of the meaning of this. And the deeper and more pure your practice, the more that this text will just reveal itself with words and even beyond words. So again, on Friday night, and again on Saturday night with Dharma Master Sure, we bring this text up into the light. We put its words out, we try to translate it. It's a text that he and I have been using and trying to access and steer by and be inspired by for 40 some plus years now. And that being the case, our enthusiasm for it almost compels us to keep putting this out and sharing. I will say this, that it's a wonderful thing in and of, if only it stops the conventional ways that we think and act and behave and feel. The Avatamsaka has this ability to challenge the existing conventional paradigm of our consciousness and even how we see the world and see our relationships and our relationship even to the natural world. This text is just incredibly, unfathomably deep and rich in that way. Even though it seems when you first approach it that it's of another world, of another language almost, of another sphere, in fact, it isn't. And it's actually a kind of stimulus to push us to break out of the narrow silos of imagination and consciousness that we continually and habitually sink ourselves in. So what I'm saying is I will continue to do this. I will focus on certain things. As you read the text, you may have a completely different takeaway, and that's fine. And you'll read it again tomorrow night or next week or next year or next lifetime, and your takeaway will be different again and again. But I'm going to focus on tonight just these two lines. Then with regard to all dharmas, one forever transcends all doubts and obstructions. And then the next one, within all worlds and in all places, turns the Dharma wheel, yet without a nature and without a turning. Thus the guiding master speaks expediently. I will say, I think, as you see in your text, at least the English text, I want to double check. Do you have what I have, which is on the third line, it's ziyu iche fa, and you have in English it's capitalized, right? The dharmas is capitalized. I'm not going to necessarily disagree with this, but I'm going to suggest if it's fa, iche fa, it's probably referring to small d dharmas as basically all phenomenal reality. The way we perceive and understand sight, sound, smells, taste, the 10,000 things as some interactive experience of our consciousness and the material world. It just refers to how the whole mind sets up and relates to manifestations of the mind. So this is basically, you want to read about this in depth, look at the Dharma, let's see, the Understanding the 100 Dharma Shastra. This is a Shastra commentary, and it's really quite good. It's available in English, and my teacher has made a commentary to it. But the Understanding of the 100 Dharmas is basically an exposition, a very clear exposition of the nature of reality as seen through the conditioned consciousness and how things work. And it has to do with form and the 5 skandhas, but also has to do with the 18 realms of existence and our emotional and mental states and so forth. It's a really profound sort of topological study detailing the dharmas. These are iche fa. And the text starts with, all dharmas are not self. Iche fa wu wo is how this shastra starts. And then the text says, what is all dharmas, iche fa, and what is no self? And then it goes into an exposition just on that one phrase. So that's why it's called a shastra, because it's taking a particular idea or concept and really analyzing it in quite detail. I'm digressing a little bit, but I think that this passage, this line here, on my first reading, you can, and I would translate it as small d. In other words, in regard to all phenomena, one forever leaves or transcends doubts and obstructions. Otherwise, you're not confused by it anymore. You really do see things as they really are, and they no longer have a hold and grasp on you. However, you could say in regard to all the Dharma, capital D, one forever transcends doubts and obstructions. It means at some level of personal cultivation and clarity, the Dharma no longer is a confusing item for you. The actual teachings, capital D, the Buddhist teachings, are then no longer obstructions or areas of confusion or doubt for you. This corresponds to a passage, and excuse me if I don't get it right, but Confucius went through stages of his development and personal cultivation. He said, when I was 15, I set my mind on the way. And he goes through at 30 and at 45. And at, I think, maybe 50, let's see, I set my mind on the way, and then there was a space of his development where all doubts and obstructions were gone. He had that clarity. And this final one was, then I could act according to my heart's desires and not transcend or overstep the bounds of what is true and real and righteous. Sorry for that word, but correct. And so you can see that this could be a level of freedom from doubt and misgivings about the teachings, that when you heard and read them, you're really clear. For example, emptiness. You no longer say, wow, what does that mean? Is that kind of a nihilistic negative thing? If everything's empty, why should I cultivate or so forth? No, you very clearly understand that true emptiness is wondrous existence and so forth. And it's not like you just understand it intellectually. You can say, well, what was that? I knew what it was last week. Oh yeah, I wrote it down. It means this. No. It means without even thought, you have no doubt and obstructions. It's immediately available to you. As the Sixth Patriarch says, as swinging a sword in battle, it's that instantaneous. It's not something you have to second think about. And so it is actually what we would call Shirshang Prajna, real mark Prajna. It's not one that you get through reading books, the first type, literary Prajna, nor is it contemplative Prajna, where you have to sit and think about it, and all of a sudden it becomes clear to you after stilling the mind. This is direct, real mark understanding. And one has then, at this point, has this kind of transcendent freedom to really understand. The result of this is that when you read the text, you read them quickly, and they flow along, and after a while it seems like the text and you are kind of the same voice and the same heart. It's not like you're reading something. It's like it's reading you, you're reading it, and it's one voice and one mind. And so you can read very quickly at this stage, and you're filled with delight and wonder and joy to the point that you lose track of time. Han Shan De Ching talks about this state, that he would start reading a text after he had started to have this freedom where all doubts and obstructions were gone, and hours and hours would go by and he wouldn't even realize he hadn't eaten or slept. He was just in this wondrous Dharma understanding, clarity, and samadhi. Anyhow, I would say at this point, it becomes a page turner. To use the expression out there, when you get a book and you can't put it down, it's a page turner. That's this with this. This is the state. So, then you have the next line I wanted to spend some time on tonight. Any ideas or questions on that? So you could do small d or capital D, and then you get into the various meanings of what that might be. We're okay? Okay, good. And again, my teacher, when he was instructing us on translation and interpretation, he says the expression he used was wuyo dingpa, or meo dingpa, literally meaning there's no fixed dharma. There's no fixed way to explain this as long as what you say matches with the letter and spirit of the text, and the spirit is the most important, and it is rupa, according to Dharma, generally. There's hundreds of different ways then to render this. So again, there's a flexibility here, a sort of creativity, but it's not without boundaries and parameters. It has to basically be according to the overall teachings that have some aspect of, and this is another way to mark it, talks about the four truths. Some aspect of the four truths have to be involved for it to be rupa, or the Eightfold Path, if you will. In other words, it should be pointing out the problem, it should be pointing out the reason for the problem, it should be pointing out a way to get past, and then of course the ending of that problem. So as long as you're staying within those markers, there's a lot of interpretation you can give to these texts. But you see, the bottom line is it's both descriptive and prescriptive. So this becomes a guiding marker for how you lecture and interpret Dharma. If it doesn't have those elements, then you're stepping out of the boundaries, the parameters from which this can make sense and actually be medicine. So then it says, within all worlds and all places, he turns the Dharma wheel. And then yet, this line here, yet it. Now we have to ask what the it is here. It's interpreted, right? It is without a nature and without a turning, so obviously this must mean the Dharma wheel. Thus the guiding master speaks expediently. So this is very interesting. I mean, this is so rich. The expediently, I think, is that Fangbian? I have to go back and look at the Chinese. Let's see. Yes? 道是方便说, yeah, expediently. In Sanskrit, this is upaya. Upaya. Fangbian Chinese, Sanskrit, upaya. Not papaya, upaya. Sorry. Yeah, I sometimes use these with my little nieces, and I'll say something like upaya, and they say, I like papaya, but it is not papaya, this is upaya. But papaya could be upaya. For example, wait. My mother used to take things that we really liked. Being in the Midwest, we never had papaya. That was like exotic, whatnot. But she could take applesauce, and she would crush our medicine in it, and then give us the medicine expediently through something that tasted good. So, upaya, papaya. I'm playing around. But in all worlds, if it is indeed all worlds, and not just this world, and not just the human realm within this world, because what we call this world is multi-layered and multifaceted. I mean, this is the first level to understand. People say, well, you got to be in the real world. What real world exactly are you talking about? Because we are here in a monastery tonight. We are in a world, and this world is real. And our activities and our consciousness and our karma is this. There are, just outside the door, another world. And down the street, yet another world. And the police cars that are going by, that's another world. And the people that are shooting up down the alleys, it's yet another world. And the people that are, watching TV and watching movies, they're in another world. Babies are sleeping, maybe, and they're in that world, right? So you could say the Avatamsaka, when it's talking about within all worlds, isn't simply talking about this sort of out there of the 10 Dharma realms of the worlds that are presented. Remember, we went through this earlier of all the different kinds of realities, the heavens, the hells, and so forth. All these realms of existence, yes, it means that. It means in all those worlds. But it can also mean in this here and now space. And I would make an argument that even though we're all here together tonight, and some people are online listening, we're not all in the same world right now. You're hearing and seeing differently according to your capacities, according to what happened to you today, according to a karma buildup, according to good roots or the lack of good roots. And so even though the text is there presenting itself to us. Each one of us will see and feel it differently based on the world that we inhabit. And the world that we inhabit is really a matrix or a coming together of all our karmic conditions. So we have a collective karmic condition here. We're all coming together here tonight. That's deep, that's true, and that's a world. But within that, there are worlds within worlds, and each one of you is in a world of your own. And I would suggest those worlds are shifting and changing almost thought to thought. So this is a very dynamic conceptualization of what world is. World is something that is always in flux and changing and becoming, coming into being, staying for a while, changing, gone, and another world comes up and so forth. So it's a really interesting thing. For some people, this is unsettling. It's like, give me a world, give me something I can hang on to, give me the black and white concrete thing. But in reality, just even from a scientific point of view, that's impossible. The ancient Greeks know this, and modern quantum physics know this too. There is everything but flux, 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 change, 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 constantly. So there's no way you can nail it down. Even though some people are pessimistic or despairing of that, on the other hand, that's an incredible tool of creative liberation. Because there is this change, that means we can change our condition, we can change our fate, we can change our understandings, we can become different. So it's both positive and negative of how you want to look at it. I tend to look at it as, because it's that way given, drop the negativity. That's just what it is. And now see it as this wonderful opportunity that actually has a law of change built into it. We have to change. We are changing, and the only difference would be using a text like this, the Avatamsaka, you change with direction, you change with directionality, with intentionality. Otherwise, the change is just random and habituated by karmic tendencies. Okay, so within all worlds and all places, he turns the Dharma wheel, meaning here what is called the guiding master. And again, I really love this expression here because it's not the God who turns the Dharma wheel. It's not the dictator of Dharma who turns the Dharma wheel, but the guiding master. So he is a master, or she's a master, primarily by their ability to guide, to inspire, to lead, to point, to direct. Now this goes back to a really fundamental principle. No one saves you but yourself. No one can, no one may. You yourself must walk the path. Masters, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, sages only guide, point, show the way. So again, this text is a guide, and the guiding master described in the text is also the guide. So the Buddha becomes then a raft or a vehicle, in a sense, not to be ridden, but to be, in a, how should we say it, activating our own mechanism for transformation and guiding it in the sense of giving steering guidepost. Now, you have in all places, and then you have, yet it's without a nature and without a turning. And I'm wondering what the following verse says. Okay, so without a nature and without a turning. This is really, really critical. Basically, I think it's saying the Dharma has no nature of its own. This is very critical. When you say something has a nature, you're saying it has a self-existing, eternal presence that is not subject to any change or fluctuation. So when the Avatamsaka says the true nature of things is no nature, what this is saying is that everything, in a sense, is conditioned, depends on something else for its arising, for its staying, for its declining, and its going. This is pratita samyutpada. Now what the text is saying here is the Dharma, the teachings, themselves also have no nature, and they're without a turning. Now, this is tricky because you could easily fall into a kind of a nihilistic stance here. But I think what it's actually saying is the Dharma itself is an expedient device arising, created, brought forth to expediently address the afflictions and attachments and illnesses, if you will, of living beings. So when it says it has no nature of its own, it's not saying there is Dharma as some absolute truth that's out there someplace like written on stone, but rather it's a fluid and flowing and flexible medicine. This is another way of looking at the having no nature. So this becomes really important because some people tend to idolize the Dharma as a truth that's in a book and then is put on this shelf and then is felt to be an object of worship and adoration and immense respect and reverence, which I would say is good if you actually open it and read it and digest it. But if you leave it on the shelf as an object of worship, you're missing the meaning of this, because it has to be something that is imbibed and taken up and used. So expediency, turning, all this language suggests application, pragmatic use of, rather than absolute distance and reverence for something apart from you. In the same way, the text says, as food, only when eaten and digested does it work its a wonder to keep us healthy. Food on a shelf or stored, or even worse, just on a menu, does nothing. And so I think this is the tone here. I'll read you a section, 2 sections of text to support this. There's many sections. Obviously the most, I would say, kind of widespread known is the parable of the raft, which most of you are familiar with. I won't have to go into tonight, but everybody knows the parable of the raft, right? The raft is, you throw together something to get to another shore. When you're on the other shore, raft has served its purpose, you just forget about it. And the Buddha says, in the same way, my Dharma, my teaching, is a raft to get you from one shore to the other. That's exactly what this is saying here. It's not something to be held on and clung to. And it's only put together because there's this shore and another shore. If there wasn't this shore and another shore, then the raft itself would not even be a relevant object. In the burning house, it's a different thing. The elder pulls the kids out of the burning house, not with a raft, but on the enticement of dharmas outside. But the enticement of the dharmas outside is that they're without a nature and without a turning. They're just to get the kids out of the house so they won't burn, so forth. You can see this. Let me share this passage, though. This is from work we've just more or less finished. Should be coming out in publication soon, from the teachings of Hanshan De Qing, a Ming Dynasty scholar monk. And the passage opens like this. He's describing how the Dharma doesn't have a nature and how it arises expediently, in his own words, with the opening of these texts. He says, we, people, ceaselessly toil away, entrapped in an illusory world of our own making. All of it a mere fabrication of our deluded thinking. So he's saying, we have created and trapped ourselves into this net of our own making, our own deluded thinking. And that is why we drift unmoored, without a compass, even without a, what do you call that goes in the bottom? Keel, without a keel or a rudder. We drift unmoored in a cycle of death and rebirth. Then he says, Buddhas, or you could say guiding masters, come into this world using endless words and language and devising skillful and appropriate expedients, including Chan and formal study. So tonight we sat in Chan, now we're doing formal study, and we think, these are clever expedients. Oh, I wonder who they're for. They're for us. All to match living beings' potentials. All to match. So expedient isn't just throwing things out kind of haphazardly or creatively. Expedient has to be towards that potential and not simply a kind of new idea. So you can think that you have an expedient way to explain Dharma or whatnot, but without it reaching and resonating with the person you're working toward that potential, it's not expedient. In fact, according to the Avatamsaka Sutra, it's not even a teaching. So unless there is this skillful words and language and examples, and I use those examples, that then reach that potential and unlock or untie that in the other person, only that is Dharma. So Dharma is reciprocal. It's not one-dimensional. It is interactive rather than just static. This is why this can't be just done in books over time, and nor can it be done remotely. So I know we're using the machines here tonight to reach out remotely, but the very best is to be in proximity and community, because it's also felt and seen and smelled with all the senses, and it's picked up kinesthetically. And this is a poor medium for that. Anyhow, then he says, yet, and this is Hanshan again, each and every technique, and now he uses the word technique for Fangbian, Upaya. It's a technique, it's a mechanism, it's a tool. It's not, he doesn't say each and every dogma or even each and every doctrine. He says each and every technique is designed solely to break living beings' attachments. That's its only purpose. And then he ends, ultimately, there is no actual Dharma to give people. So, in case you got kind of accusing me of going down a nihilistic road here tonight, because what I said is Dharma is, in fact, an expedient technique, and it's not an absolute fixed thing. Hanshan Deching is saying, ultimately, there is no actual Dharma to give people. There's only medicine or expedience to untie them from their kinks and obstructions. Once that's done, Dharma's done. It's over with. It's done what it had to do. In the same way you get a radiation treatment and it takes out that cancer, you don't continue to get radiation treatments. You stop because it's done what's needed to do, or chemo, or a headache. You take the Tylenol, whatever, I'm not pushing brands here tonight. You take whatever you take legally to get rid of your owies and your boo-boos, and then once they're gone, you don't keep taking it. That would be absurd and also harmful. So in the same way, if we understand what Dharma is for, we don't accumulate it necessarily in books and texts to keep in a library, but we're really actively, almost desperately, urgently looking for something that will relieve the anxiety, the itch, the suffering. Okay, in the Platform Sutra, I'll give another example of this. This is a Dharma Master Huineng. He says, good and wise friends, all the sutras and writings of the great and small vehicles, and the 12 divisions of the canon, in other words, the whole entire repository of the teachings, all of these were established because of people and could not have been set up and could only have been set up because of their wisdom nature. Whew, wait a minute. So they're all set up because of people, or they're put forth because of people, and because people have a wisdom nature potential, therefore there can be this reciprocity. So you could set up Dharma, but if people didn't have the potential, it'd be useless, right? It's like the parable of sowing seeds on concrete. So only when the earth is fertile can there be this connection. So then the Dharma can only be effective if it's hitting on the wisdom nature. However clouded and obscured that is, the Dharma has to find a way to cause that a little to resonate a little. Then he says, if there were no people in the world, all the myriad Dharma teachings would not exist by themselves. Whoa. So then we think about this, it's a very different way of looking at Dharma. Therefore you should realize, says Huineng, that the myriad Dharma teachings arise because of people, and all sutras are taught and explained for people. Okay, so I just wanted to spend a little time on that tonight, and then maybe in the time left talk about the two extremes. You remember this came up also in the verse prior to it. It says, completely washed away the wearisome dust. Unmoving, he leaves the two extremes. But maybe I'll talk about something else here. In other words, to try to bring this maybe closer to home. If you look at the condition, I met somebody today who said, I get up in the morning and I only glance at the newspaper and then I pull away really quickly, because if I look at it too long, I go down a rabbit hole and it's really hard to get back. And by that she meant there's so much darkness and despair and trauma, really, going on in the world everywhere, that unplugging from that is not just a question of not wanting to do, it's actually a survival mechanism, because there's only so much human heart and human consciousness can take before it becomes overwhelming. Now, on the other side of that, because we have so much technology available to us, anything that's happening in the world today can be streamed to us directly from multi-channels, and we can become over-informed, overstimulated. In the past, even my grandparents' generation, if something like a war broke out, it would be weeks before they learned of it. And even what they learned of it would be just news bits and pieces. It wouldn't be 24-hour streaming, visceral images coming through. And so, on one hand, that keeps us better informed. On the other hand, it has the danger of confusing the spirit and us losing our center and becoming very depressed and very anxious. And so I'm asking a question then, what dharma now, today, would be good and appropriate to expediently respond to this condition that we find ourselves? And those two extremes, nihilism and eternalism we talked about, or permanence and impermanence, I'm going to suggest another way of looking at that is we become overexcited and over-anxious on this information. We enter the overload state, and literally we start tremoring, not just in our nerves and our whatnot, but in our deep neurotransmitters and everything. We are on, and it's not a healthy on. Or we go to the other extreme and just zone out, tune out, pay no attention, either through drugs or indifference or whatnot. But our response to the stimulation that's coming in can be overexcitement, hyper neurotic responding, or it can be withdrawing from reality so much that I don't even pay attention or care. War here, famine there, drought there, I don't know. But the Buddha text, it seems to me, is saying both of those are bad medicines. These are not good medicines to take. And so this middle way is presented to us. And I just wanted to maybe hint a little bit on that. Between 2019 and 2022, the rates of anxiety symptoms from adults jumped. From adults. Now, they're doing adults. If you get into kids, you have even more sensitive canaries in the mind, so to speak. But adults jump from 8% to nearly 30% in 2 years. The anxiety symptoms have gone from 8 to 30% in 2 years. And the rates of depression symptoms of despondency and actual depression, despairing, hopelessness, have gone from 7% to 23% in 2 years. So between 2019 and 2022, now I see nothing out there that says in 2023, oh, it's going to go down. Because now I'm sorry to say we've added something that I felt in my generation that most of you didn't feel, which is the absolute imminent threat of nuclear extinction. When I was a kid in the 40s and 50s, especially after World War II and the Cold War that came after, we lived in a constant existential sense that at any moment, human life and this planet as we know it could be actually extinguished. Came very close in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Somehow, over the years, that has receded, fortunately. On the other hand, in the last year or so, this has now come back to be a very viable threat to human existence. Even though you think you're dealing with it, you're not. Your bugs, your body, your hormones are picking up the whiff of this. This is why we are sensitive beings. It has a benefit and a bad side to it. But we're picking up on it. We don't know what to do with it because it's so overwhelming, and it's the hands, literally, of madmen who are making toys out of these tools of destruction. And see human existence as some kind of negotiable plaything. These are the times we live in. The younger generation, when they pick up on this, add to this the environmental disasters and ecological disasters they're facing. And then the personal existential disasters of meaningful life and career and supporting themselves. And you pile this on, I'm not trying to be, Cassandra here, but, it's real. Okay, so I'm saying, then we ask ourselves, what can Dharma do at this point to respond to this? What would be the medicine that's needed? I even heard somebody on the day talking about techniques for calming. And he was saying bonsai plants. I'm going to do bonsai plants because I used to do trout fishing, and when I do trout fishing, I throw it in. My whole senses work down to the waves, the wind, the water, everything, the little bugs, and I entered a state of calm. He said, I don't fish anymore, but now I discovered bonsai plants because you calm yourself that way. It wasn't bad. It's not a bad thing to do. But really, if you think about it, bonsai plants, what we're facing, I don't know that that's really going to do it. Moreover, if you're a reasonable person, you're going, I don't want a kind of calm. I want a real calm. I want a calm that's coming from some clear seeing things as they are and a real centering and balance. I don't want a drug. I don't want an escape. As nice as that seems, because in a sense, we feel when we do that, we're like ostriches burying our head in the sands. For the ostrich that buries its head in the sand, the danger seems to be gone. He's like, calm. But the danger isn't gone, okay? It's like when something threatening or whatnot comes, once my little niece would go, all gone. Well, it wasn't. She saw a big dog or something, and when she did this, then she was okay, but when she did, then it was back again. So she realized very quickly that this does not remove the danger. It just removes your awareness of the danger. So we have to be careful when we're talking about calming here to make sure it's constructive, real calming, and not sort of illusionary escape calm, because that could actually make the situation worse, because now we're not addressing it. We're just pretending it's not there, and it won't go away. On the other hand, we can become hyper over and try to, take it out and really deal with it and find ourselves just burning rubber and getting more and more anxious. So I'm sort of raising the question tonight. I don't know that I'm going to have enough time to deal with this, but maybe I'll talk about it more next week. But I think the Dharma, these teachings, if they are genuine and real thing, and I think they are, have ways to talk to what we're talking about here in a very deep and profound way. Not necessarily simple, not necessarily, quote, quick, but I think in a deep fundamental way, there's a couple of teachings we could bring out, and maybe I'll do this next week, to talk about how we might address then this issue that's facing humankind now. Whether we're paying attention or not, it's there, we can feel it. And I think this type of engaged Buddhism is really where we want to be going, which is neither extreme of denialism and falling into a kind of blanked out passivity, nor a hyper response, Not simply meditating, but not simply just demonstrating. What tools or what Dharma techniques could be made available if we look at this deeply that might actually have a sane and viable and healthy engaged response to what we're dealing with here? I think it's a very, very important question, and I wanted to use maybe this text next week, go into this a little more. I would say more tonight because it's obviously fresh in my mind, but we're out of time. So we'll stop here. Jinchuan, were you going to say something tonight? You have show and tell. Okay. Oh, you shouldn't have. I really appreciate that. Thank you. That's my gift, right? Okay.
Okay, so I thought what would be nice is actually, let me actually just sit here.
Camera capture.
Oh, it's okay. Probably that's more important. Right. So Marty was talking about the Dharma wheel tonight, and I thought actually we have something really precious at the monastery that's just going to be here for the day because we're going to bring it down to River Vihara tomorrow, which is a stained glass image of the Dharma wheel with the deer on the side.
Wow.
It's pretty, mountains, sky, blue sky. And so just looking at it, it's very striking. I don't know if people can see on the internet, but it's stained glass, so if you imagine light shining through it, it kind of sends out this kind of radiant, multicolored kind of, you can see it up on top, this kind of energy. And so I was just looking a little bit online, kind of what the Dharma wheel symbolizes. It's interesting, I couldn't quite find primary sources, so I have to be honest. I'm getting it from, I'll be very interested.
Next time too, but you're right.
I found
right.
that, of course, people, there is the very famous teaching, which actually is the image here, which is the turning of the Dharma wheel, the first teaching that the Buddha gave after his awakening in the Pali Canon at least. In our tradition, we say the Avatamsaka is the first teaching. But in the Pali Canon, they say that the Dharma Chakra Pavritana, Dharma wheel turning sutta is actually the first one. That's when the Buddha teaches the Four Noble Truths. But how it's explained, I was looking it up, is that there's this circle, this hub in the middle, which often represents the precepts. And I can see some primary text connection is when we recite the Pratimoksha in our tradition. The preface of the Pratimoksha actually talks about the precepts, the Vinaya being the linchpin, the hub of the Dharma. Without it, everything falls apart. And they say that these three kind of circular things in the middle are the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. And often they're spokes. This one is a little bit more stylistic, but you'll see there's 8, 5, 6, 7, 8. That represents the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. And I was looking at different ways people explain it. Some people explain that this circle represents the kind of perfection of the Dharma, and that the edge here represents mindfulness and concentration that's necessary for our practice, and that these things sticking out actually represent insight, the kind of penetrating quality of insight. So this is, I think, a very beautiful image, but
What
also has a
about the
lot of
deer?
significance. The deer, well, for us, why Redwood Vihara is very appropriate is 'cause we have a lot of deer that walks through the property. We were meditating there, and the deer walk by. They kind of look at us. What are these humans doing? And they keep walking by.
Who is a guest? Are we guests?
Yeah.
They host,
Yeah, they're probably the hosts of the forest for sure. They've been walking there for generations. But in the Pali Canon, that sutta is actually spoken at Deer Park, which is why this image has become very iconic in Buddhism. The two deer and the Dharma wheel. And Buddha basically in that first teaching sets the Dharma wheel in motion. And so I thought I just wanted to share this image, which is so beautiful. And since we have it here for today, and if you want to in the future come to see it again, we're definitely happy to have you come to Redwood Vihara. We're building, or we're kind of finishing our Buddha hall. And if you imagine the Buddha hall, we actually have a round circle at the very top. And this is going to go at the very top with a light behind it shining out into the Buddha hall. So.
And interesting is
Oh.
speaking about expedient means, because how the artist portrayed that is, I think this is only made
Only America.
in American California. The idea on stained glasses, I didn't see in China so many stained glasses when we were. In Europe, in America, we have a very big tradition, but also have a kind of element of folk art.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of speaking to sensitivity, aesthetic of people who live here, and also cross the cultures, because maintain the symbols, what they're universal, but express them in the way that kind of connect.
The thing that is standing out for me too is one, the interconnectedness between heaven and earth, and then the interconnectedness with other beings besides people. Having the deer in there is symbolic of all living beings and not simply the realm of people. In fact, we're probably the most troublesome inhabitants of the planet rather than the deer. The other thing is the mountains. And there's a wonderful passage from the Avatamsaka. You see, that could be the sun or the moon in the back. But it says, the people of good roots, especially great bodhisattva-hearted people, are the first to receive the light when it rises in the morning, and the last to show it when the sun or moon sets. So it's like they're the quickest to pick it up, they sustain and hold it the longest, and this indicates this capacity to shine or receive the teachings. I also really resonate with the roundness and the idea that the wheel is for something to transport and carry you. It's not edges here, it's not squares, but it's a supple vulnerability, softness, transformative. As the cart rolls and wheels and moves from something. It's really cool. And yet, you feel a centering. You feel it's not just kind of coming apart. This, by the way, was done by Carolyn Powers, Doug Powers' wife. Her Dharma tour is this. And I could say, I don't know if I had that talent. I would think that's something I would like to spend my day doing as well. It's another way of Shofa speaking Dharma. We always think about it as words, but it can be spoken through art.
Yeah.
And in some ways, maybe more powerful than at least my words, but this is good. No, this is not for sale. And no, there's no 800 number you call at the end to get your personal copy. But it is to
it's
absorb.
priceless. Yeah.
Wow. You're taking that up tomorrow?
Yeah, we're taking it tomorrow, and we're going to have to install it up on the top of the Buddha hall with light shining through it. So.
Wow, great.
So maybe once, Marty, you can speak Friday from Redwood Vihara so people can see.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. Can we transmit from Redwood Vihara?
Yeah.
Oh.
We can make it
Okay.
happen.
Sounds good. Any more announcements or?
Well, I think if people look at the Berkeley Monastery website, berkeleymonastery.org, there's a number of events. I think November 1st, DRBU is having a special film screening online of Ted Berger's new film called The Mountain Path, which is a kind of reimagining of his very kind of well-known film Amongst White Clouds. And so if you wish to join in, I think it's November 1st, 7th, 6:30 to 8:30. There's a chance to also participate. Reverend Heng Sure will be there to discuss it with Ted Berger, the film director. And so it'll also be part of the DRBU kind of ecosystem. So it's definitely worth joining in. Another medium to speak the Dharma, for sure, the film. Oh, and Carol Ruth Silver will be speaking this Monday at 7:30 p.m. on, what was the title? Race? Kind of, we can find on the website, but it's kind of, she's first-hand accounts of actually being in the civil rights movement and kind of looking at the questions around race in our society, the history and what we can do about it.
She's on our board of directors for the university, and it's a prominent
Is your
attorney.
Mike still there?
Mike.
You can just talk into it.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So she's on our board of directors for the university and has been a prominent attorney and activist in San Francisco for many years. But what she's talking about, she goes back to the Freedom Riders back in Mississippi that were basically got the whole civil rights movement going, arrested and busted. If you look online, you'll see her mugshot next to her now with her Mississippi County Jail thing there where she got arrested. So she's been in this kind of movement for a long time and has a lot to share, and still, although she's old, she's still very active. So there you would, in a sense, I hate this expression, but you would getting something from the horse's mouth. You're getting someone who put her feet where her thoughts were and actually engaged in this. At the ages, I'm guessing at that time she was in her early 20s when she went down. And you know that wasn't just, let's go celebrate and help people down here. That was the same place where the 3 civil rights young men were murdered and killed.
Wow.
In which a movie was made about this, and they're still haven't solved who and what and how and the responsibility for that. It's called Mississippi Burning, if you want to see that. But there were 3 civil rights workers from the north, young men who went down, and basically they were killed and buried in the swamp and left. So that was the era. That's when it was very violent. So it's a very brave and courageous thing for someone to do, and she's still got that energy. So the film plus that,
Yeah.
not bad.
Okay.
Skip the baseball's football finals.
Yes. Oh yeah, the event on translation. You know what time exactly it was? It's on their Berkeley Monastery website, so I can look it up real quick. I have it on my phone. It's November 20th? Thursday night, November 20th. Yeah, translation as spiritual practice. So if people would like to get an update on our activities, please go to berkeleymonastery.org. So yeah, translation as spiritual practice, October 20th, Thursday, 7:30 p.m. It's going to be on Zoom. And the other 2 events are there as well. And we're also still having our Thursdays and Fridays open for people to come and meditate. Okay? Let's dedicate merit. You want to hold it? Yeah, maybe you just hold it. You probably don't want to drop it.
I can take it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Don't drop it. Oh yeah, that would be one of those. Oops. Oops. Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward, May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the three jewels.